When I was at the European Merck, we were working on this Women in Leadership Action Team. And we started finding out that the succession plans for the top executives reporting directly into the CEO were almost exclusively white men. And we knew if women and professionals of color weren't showing up in succession plans, we just weren't going to change the company. So I created one PowerPoint slide with each one of my CEO's leaders at the time. And I didn't put the names of who was in their succession plans, but I put a pink F or a blue M for each one of the roles on their teams, whether it was going to be a woman or a man. And when you saw that one slide with the amount of men who were on the succession plan versus women or professionals of color, it looked like the ocean in Aruba. And it was at the time, our CEO was a woman from Spain, and she was shocked to see that. So it's sometimes just starting with your own data to wake yourself up and to realize the missteps that you're making along the way.
So welcome to our podcast, Eileen. I met Eileen, just for all of you, at the AGC, the Associations of General Contractors, a few months ago. And since then, every time that we talk, it's been a pleasure having this conversation. So welcome, Eileen, to this
Thank
podcast.
you.
I appreciate your time.
I'm excited to be here.
Yes. So, well, tell us a little bit about you as a human being and your professional life and personal life, whatever you wanna share. That would be great.
Sure. Let's start with the person. My name is Eileen Martin. Currently, I'm the vice president at Suffolk. At a personal level, I'm a mom. I have two grown children. Our son is 24 and our daughter's 22. My husband and I have been together about 30 years. We split our time between Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and Vermont. We're a big skiing family. So in the winter, that's how we're killing the time, so to speak, in New England and getting through the cold. And I'm the proud mother of a 10-year-old Yorkie who bosses us around all the time. So that's it. That's me. I'm
Um,
from Holyoke, which is a blue collar town out in Western Mass, and I think that shaped a lot of who I am, and I never forget where I'm from.
yes, actually, that is a very interesting part of your life. I was looking into, I did a little bit of research about you, and I noticed that you started in the healthcare industry and you were with them for a while. You started with Merck, I believe, and then you moved to Blue Cross Blue Shields, and then you were in sales at the time.
Yes.
And then you moved to EMD Serrano, and then you kind of make a turn then into diversity and inclusion. So I'm very interested to hear what
Yeah.
made you take that route.
Thank you. It's a great question because it's not obvious in the thread of my life, but what happened when I was at EMD Serono, I was at our annual marketing and sales meeting. It was the first time I had been to it, and it's a really great, energizing hoopla meeting. And I realized that the front row of all of the presenters at this, particular meeting were all white men. And I thought it was very ironic because at the time, EMD Serrano had products that were almost exclusively for women. We had a product for infertility. We had a product for multiple sclerosis, which adversely impacts more women. And I thought, gosh, this is a problem that I could probably part of fixing. Well, you know the expression, if you see something, say something. So at that meeting, the way that I remember it is I approached my HR business partner in the ladies' room, which is where all great conversations take place. And I said, that doesn't seem consistent with our products or our messaging. And, what should we be doing about it? Fast forward, we created a women's resource group, employee resource group, business resource group, whatever you call it. And it took off like wildfire in the US. And Bryn Chase was my co-founder. She's at Moderna. And we became so successful that eventually that women's resource group not only became a global resource group, but it ultimately turned into becoming my full-time focus. That's how I got into diversity, equity, and inclusion, was just seeing a problem of inconsistency in women not represented in a room that they should be in and saying something about it and doing something about it. It's probably the best decision I ever made because I tell everybody I have the best job at Suffolk, and I truly believe that. Don't tell John Fish, our CEO.
Want. So that is interesting because I saw that you were one of the co-founders of the Women's Employee Resource Group there. And then I also know that you are involved with the Big Sister program. You are also involved with the Boston Club, the 2020 Women on Board. So you are very dedicated to elevate women in every industry. So why is that motive? I understand that first time in that meeting you saw a lot of men out there, but what is keeping you motivated to continue working on that?
Yeah, I think that it's a problem that isn't resolved yet. I think that I hope that for my daughter, who's 22, I hope for her generation that we won't need women's resource groups and that we won't need to have these conversations because there will be a level playing field. Um, but my optimism sometimes clouds my reality. And I'm not really sure that we won't have to continue to fight for equality in any industry. Um, when you look at the representation of women as CEOs in our country, it's deplorable, and yet women outweigh the number of men in undergraduate degrees, et cetera. So we just need to be more intentional as organizations across this country um, about hiring women, noticing the talents of women, and promoting women.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm biased, but I agree with you.
It's a good bias.
What have you seen any progress since you started back in 2015, I would say 10 years ago? Have you noticed progress in that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I would say during my 7 years at my last company, we really were intentional about the progress. So at the time, we were roughly about 34% women in leadership roles and above. And when I left, it was 43%. But you have to be very intentional and prescriptive. Some of the things that we're doing right now at Suffolk that are having a fantastic impact is we are working with our regional leaders on assessing their data and assigning them goals for is it hiring more women? Is it promoting more women? Is it developing more women? As well as people of color, because we know from research that as women advance in corporate America or any facet of the industry in America, that we leave women of color behind. So the women who are advancing are historically white women, and we're leaving our Black and Brown sisters behind. So we also have to be very mindful of that. So at Suffolk, we're measuring that. We're meeting with our leaders either monthly or quarterly. Another thing that we did that was very intentional was we came up with a differential referral bonus. So we have an existing referral bonus. Roughly 40% of the talent here at Suffolk comes from our own employees, which says so much about our culture. But it wasn't moving the needle enough. And so what we did was we added an additional kicker to the existing referral program, and we piloted it in our third quarter last year. And almost instantly, we had almost a twofold referral of more women. And we more than doubled our referrals for professionals of color. So that's really building our bench. And that will ultimately change how Suffolk looks. And of course, the data points that we're measuring as well. Another thing that we did very intentionally was that we worked with the Gina Raimondo, who's the Secretary of Commerce, on the Million Women in Construction Pledge. And that's something just to get more women. And we talk about women in construction, we can talk about it from two lenses. We can talk about tradeswomen, which we desperately need more women in construction in our trades. And then also looking at it through the lens of women in construction from in the corporate setting. So the women at Suffolk are out on our project sites, all day long. We also have women here at our headquarters who are doing the estimating, the financing, the marketing, and the typical, human resources roles. So that's how I look at women in construction from those two lenses. But we absolutely need more women in this industry because there's so many data points that support why it's important. It makes for a safer project site. It makes for a more collaborative project site. It's better for the communities where we live and build. So I could go on, but those are some of the things that we have done intentionally that we're already seeing the needle move on.
Awesome. So I have a couple of questions from what you just mentioned. One is your referral program. So what do you think made the difference? I understand it was you were motivating people to bring more people of color or more women into the company. But what do you think that prior to offering more money was preventing these people to bring more diversity?
It's a great question. And, historically in the construction industry, it's been dominated by white men. And so when you have white men making referrals, it's typically they're going to refer people that they're in their very small network. I think the difference with why this was more impactful was that people had to become more consciously aware of, oh, right, I know some talented women, I know some professionals of color, and it's really giving them that intentional nudge to be thinking about broadening their network and bringing more people into the fold. And it was very simply a communications issue as well. People need to know that there's a problem that we need their help fixing. And they also need to know what are some of the data points that we're going to achieve in working on this problem together. So, yeah, I think sharing that data, making some data-driven decisions, communicating it well, and just nudging people to get out of their comfort zone and expand their networks.
Yeah. I was gonna mention that I think that extra motivation will make you think more on different options, right? If I have my best friend and there is an opportunity for her or him to get a job, but then if there is an extra motivation, I could broaden my vision and think of more people that would benefit from that. The second question that I had was on terms of I understand the numbers show that bringing more women into the industry betters the industry as a whole. Why do you think that is it's taking longer for the CEOs or the C-suite people to really embrace that at a faster pace?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's probably a multifaceted answer, but I think from the women's lens, we have to see it to be it. So if we don't see women in trades on a construction site, we don't think that we can be that person. If we don't see women in the construction trailers, working on estimating or whatever it is, that we don't see our place there. More importantly, however, is once we get women either in trades or on the business side of construction, is the culture. There has to be a supportive culture that embraces the women in that particular environment. And I would say the one core value at Suffolk that I'm most aligned with, or I think supports women most importantly, is the caring culture. And when you come to Suffolk, it's palpable. You immediately feel that people care about you. And if you're caring about somebody, you're embracing them as their whole self in their job. And that in and of itself is it's going to create a culture that attracts women, but keeps women and keeps them happy. And retention is something that we're always measuring, which, we have to measure as well.
That is very true because statistics show that women join the construction industry and then they just leave because there is not a support system. So you are totally 100% right.
Yeah, and it's the one thing, believe it or not, I know this is going to sound a little bit corny, but when people say to me, you left the pharmaceutical industry, which is such a great industry, and you went to the construction industry. And I would answer that question by saying, number one, it was the opportunity. I knew that I wanted to push myself to get the vice president's role. So I wanted to go for the brass ring. So women should be going for the brass ring at all times. And number two, with my volunteer work in the Boston community, I would hear John Fish and Suffolk over and over again, how much they contribute to the community, how they're actively engaged, how many dollars John Fish gives of himself and his company that supports diverse aspects of Boston. That is what drew me to Suffolk. It wasn't that I automatically came to the construction industry. It was that level of importance, of a commitment to the community that drew me to Suffolk, and I'm so happy that I did.
Right. Like, just tell me about that experience because coming, I don't know a lot about the healthcare industry. So I wonder what were the differences that you found in between the two industries?
Yeah, it's a great question because I think what I was surprised the most with is how similar the industries are. And by similar, I mean, Suffolk has all of the same departments that a pharmaceutical company would have, other than, of course, like research and development and the science piece. But we have the technology aspect, we have the legal aspect, we have the marketing aspect. So there were so many parallels that surprised me. People at Suffolk went to all the same colleges as people in pharma. Um, I would say one of the key differences is that we're starting at a lower point with respect to women and professionals of color. Pharma is a little bit ahead of construction, and there's a long path ahead of us in construction.
I somehow find Suffolk quite advanced in technology, in diversity compared to other construction companies. How and I find it very motivating what John is doing. Like I think he's trying to set an example of, and that's my guessing. I have not talked to him, but an example of what is possible in construction and what it means to bring more women into the industry and more diversity into the industry. What do you think, or do you think that people are seeing that example? That you think other companies are gonna follow his lead?
I think so. John likes to be out in the forefront and likes to be leading not only in this space, but also in the technology space, and really being the most innovative construction company. And so he completely understands. He's a father of daughters. He completely understands not only the business importance of this, but the personal commitment that he makes every day to support our progress. So I'm not sure if I answered your question, but yes, I think that we at Suffolk we're constantly pushing the pedal in this space in light of the fact that we currently have a very different administration coming in politically that may not be as supportive as the previous administration. Our support in this space will not waver.
Mhm. Yeah. Actually, that was my follow-up question in terms, without getting into politics or anything like that. Do you think that the DEA departments in companies were, or in your experience, obviously you can only talk about your experience, they were giving opportunities to these diverse people because of merit, or it was because you needed to fulfill a number? What's your experience in that?
Yeah, so I'm going to take that from two sides. So first of all, I don't think anyone wants a job or a promotion simply because they're a woman or a professional of color. We all want to have earned that opportunity fair and square. However, we know from unconscious bias that those opportunities are sometimes given more to men because of history of men in the workforce. But I think that um, the intentionality still has to be there to make sure that women are in the room when these decisions are being made.
Yeah. Yeah, and agree. And being myself, women and Latina, which means a minority in this country, I don't want anybody to give me a job or a position just because I am a Latina woman.
Yeah.
I want to earn it. I want to feel that I'm providing and I'm creating value, right? I don't want anything that is given to me because you want to fulfill a number. And I think that's the general consensus of diverse people in this country.
Yeah. And,
Um,
and that's the first piece of it. And the second piece is that we'll always hire the best person, always. And research shows that hiring a woman or hiring a professional of color actually takes a little bit longer in the talent acquisition process. So if you're aware of that and you know that that's going to happen, you're still going to be hiring the best person for the job. It may just take a little bit longer to find the perfect candidate, whether it's a woman, professional of color, or a man. We'll always hire the most qualified person, regardless of everything that I've said. But also knowing that it's going to take a little bit longer to broaden the pool of candidates.
why does it take longer?
Great question. Women need nudges. We need to get out of our own way sometimes. And research from Harvard shows that women will only apply to a role if they're 60%, excuse me, if they're 100% qualified. Men will apply if they're only 60% qualified. So there's already that 40% gap that we're missing out on there. So we need to get out of our own way. We need to go for the brass ring, as I said earlier. That's why it takes longer because I have a director role open right now. My talent acquisition person has reached out to people who weren't even looking. And then when they pick their heads up, and they're both women, the two candidates are both women, when they pick their heads up and they see these opportunities, that's great. But they needed that nudge from the talent acquisition person first. And research supports that. So as women, I think that we need to also be nudging one another. There was a woman who was a receptionist here at Suffolk, and she was a superstar. And I went to her one day and I said, I see you are capable of so many great things. And I would love to be part of your journey, whatever help you need from me, whether it's writing your resume or getting ready for interviews. Well, fast forward within a year at Suffolk, she's already now promoted and she's working on one of our project sites. So it's, and she literally said, like, Eileen, if you hadn't nudged me, I don't think I would have gone for the job. So we really, really need to help boost each other and pick each other up. And men can play a tremendous role in this as well. It just doesn't have to be women helping women. I've had great mentors who were cisgender white men who helped pull me along in the process. But women need to change our perspective and have it not be so much that women are competing against each other, but elevating each other.
I love you, Eileen, for all of these comments because it is true to the statistics that you are mentioning, and it is for everything, right? It's not only for career move, it's for entrepreneurship, it's for everything. Like we have to trust more in ourselves. And even I think at home, I always think that in a heterosexual marriage, I always think that the woman probably is the boss at home. So
I
um,
agree.
and I think the second point that you mentioned is very important is how we as women support each other. Um, because we definitely should start looking each other as not as an adversary, but as a team, as a tribe, how we can support each other and grow each other. And I'm sure if you can help one of us move up, I'm sure she's gonna reach out to you and bring you up again. And that's how I feel that we should support each other. But in particular for the construction industry, is there Are you seeing that that movement is happening? Are you seeing like I think there are more women coming into the job sites and in the
Absolutely. Yeah.
input among women? Are you, as a VP of, are you creating programs to kind of create that awareness that women should support more women?
Absolutely. First of all, we have a very robust Women Who Build is the name of our employee resource group, our business resource group, and they are incredibly strong across the entire company. You know, we span from here to California. Women Who Build are constantly doing programming to boost each other up. We're actually running mentoring circles. We're doing training for our talent acquisition people on how and why it may take longer and how to approach the talent acquisition process differently for women and professionals of color. So we're doing so many things and approaching this problem from so many different angles. And yes, we're seeing more women not only in our offices, we're seeing more women on our construction sites, and they are supporting each other and they're pulling each other from behind. And it's critically important. It's also necessary to move the needle.
Right. So let me, maybe this is not something that you can control this next question, but what would be your suggestion? I guess that would be my interest. I belong to a group of women in construction in Facebook, and I hear a lot of women saying that they really want to get into the industry, but it has not been easy for them. They don't know where to start. They don't know who to contact. When they reach out to unions, there is a limited capacity that they have, and they have to wait for years in order to get there. How? So I see like we need more women, but in a way there is a barrier there, a bottleneck. How do you see we could solve that problem? How we can eliminate that bottleneck?
Yeah, I would say that we are supporting organizations that are devoted exclusively to getting more women into the trades. So on the national level, I referred to the Million Women in Construction Pledge. So that's taking it from a public-private partnership perspective. Then at a very local level, there are organizations such as Building Pathways, and that is devoted exclusively to getting more women into the trades. And I think it's also incredibly helpful, and for people who don't know the construction industry, that when we get the opportunity to bid on a job, that the owner or the developer, whoever they might be, um, the majority of the time is going to ask us to have women-owned and minority-owned businesses on the project site. They're also going to ask for more local talent. Um, so we have a program called Build With Us at Suffolk. And what that is we take women and minority-owned businesses and we sort of give them like a compressed night school of how to do business with Suffolk. And by growing their business with Suffolk, they're going to grow their business with other GCs as well once they know how to do business development, how to do risk assessment, how to even get loans. So that's another way that we're removing barriers for getting more women onto our project sites, along with those local partnerships, such as Building Pathways that I mentioned. I don't know if I answered your question, but
You did. And do you see that trend mostly in New England, the trend of owners asking for more diverse businesses and workforce, or do you see it at the nation level?
yeah, that's a great question because we are seeing it certainly in California, certainly in Massachusetts, certainly in New York, definitely quite a bit still happening in Texas. Florida, maybe not as much as we would like to see, given the government and the climate down there. But we are still committed to it, even when our owners are not asking for it. And we're actually measuring the number of women and minority-owned businesses working on our project sites. And we're also looking at the dollar value so that what we're working on is to come up with an overarching goal to say, Suffolk is committed to X% women and minority businesses on our project sites. We're also committed to local talent working on our projects. And we have created some really great processes. A woman on my team, her name is Jamie, has come up with just some systematic ways to make it easier for people, women and minorities, to get on our project sites, such as just a very simple leveraging of technology. You can use a QR code when you walk by one of our project sites if you're interested in becoming a laborer on one of our project sites, and the application automatically comes to us. We make sure that the project team knows about that. And so it's also using systems to remove those barriers that have historically kept women and professionals of color behind.
Right, that is great. How about like mentorship for them? Do you have any program or anything that probably this especially I think especially for women in trades, because kind of in the corporate world, in the office world, you could manage that mentorship in certain way, but how about for women in the trades?
That's a great question. So we're doing mentorship for Suffolk employees right now. We're doing what's called mentoring circles. So we're taking a leader in each one of our respective regions, and they are mentoring a group at a time of women and professionals of color. And what's so interesting from the feedback, obviously, it's been incredibly positive from the mentees. And Carolyn on my team is managing this, and she's created the entire thing. She curated this program on her own. And we've also found and heard from our leaders, who are some of the white men, that they're learning just as much as the mentor of this particular mentoring circle. So it's really interesting to hear the feedback that they are hearing from the boots on the ground of how they can do a better job at the higher levels in the organization to make it better for everybody on our project sites. So it's just been a really, really great success. Of course, we're tweaking it as we go. We're also going to have a mentoring circle exclusively for our Women Who Build cohort. So that's going to be exciting. So we're launching that soon. However, forget about the construction industry. Women, we have mentors, right? We're pretty good about having mentors and reaching out to people. But what we really need are executive sponsors. So an executive sponsor is going to be a little bit different than a mentor, because they're typically somebody who's ahead of you in an organization, maybe one or two levels ahead of you, that can actually directly impact your career. Carla Harris is a woman at Morgan Stanley in New York, and she has a YouTube segment on this. No, it's a TED Talk, pardon me. And I highly encourage people to look it up, because it really talks about sponsorship and how it's more impactful for women. We're hoping to start a program at Suffolk, but we're working on the mentoring piece first and ultimately getting to the executive sponsorship piece.
Wow, like you are really at the front edge of all of this. I have never heard. I mean, every question that I have asked you, you are already working on that. So just to understand, these mentors are also white men, right? That's what you were saying. They are also mentoring these women, and they are learning a lot from the process.
They are learning a ton. They are learning so much. And some of the barriers and entry points of women in construction in the past are little things that can be easily tweaked. And let me give you an example. Um, the clothing, the apparel. So Suffolk has apparel. We like people to look professional on our project sites. And the apparel was men's apparel. Well, not only did that not work for women's bodies, but even the harnesses that are built to keep women safe on project sites for women in trades were built for men's bodies. So we had to put a spotlight on that and make sure that the harnesses and the safety equipment was made for women. And then we had to shift and work with our marketing team to make sure that the apparel actually fits women's bodies and is appropriate for women as they're working on the project sites. Another small and yet large barrier was that there are sometimes, porta potties on sites. Well, if the porta potty doesn't have a roof on it and you're a woman, and it's a 30-story skyscraper, you're really not going to feel comfortable going and using that. So those are some areas that we've addressed at Suffolk to make it easier for a woman to be successful on a project site.
That's also that reminded me. I mean, you have met me. I'm very petite, and when I was in the job site, there were not even like size S vests. So everything was like L and above. So my vest was kind of a dress for me because it was like wide and long, and that was all he could give me. So I totally get it. And obviously, there was not party parties there. So well, I was in the job trailer, right? So I sometimes I would just go walk, like go around the job site and go to the nearest Target or coffee place or any place where I could use the bathroom. I just didn't want to share, the potty with the guys. So it's all these barriers. And even when I became a mom, and I think there are some, I heard there were some investment lately on actually a couple of women who started a company for nursing, for women nursing in construction, because that was another barrier. I had to do pumping, not to be too explicit here, but inside the car, I would have to go and look at like an empty space in the job site or a corner or something, and then do pumping, and then for my daughter. So all of these barriers um, for women are something that we do need to work on, and I'm so glad to hear that Suffolk is thinking about those. And
Yeah. We're doing more than thinking, we're acting.
acting.
And I think the important piece is having the ear of the women and the professionals of color on the project sites of what's keeping them awake at night. We've done surveys, we've done focus groups. So if we're not aware of the problem, there's nothing we can do about it. And that's the other thing. Women need to speak up. And it can be uncomfortable because we're raised to be nice and to get along with everybody and to avoid conflict. And that's not helping us. It's just not helping us. If you bring up an issue with a constructive solution, 9 out of 10 times, whether you're at Suffolk or anywhere else, you're going to get that. You're going to get that push through. But a good friend of mine in Germany would say, a closed mouth doesn't get fed. So you do have to open your mouth if you want to see change in your industry. I know you have to think about that one. I think the other important thing that is transferable, if you will, regardless of industry, is that when we think about interviewing people, bringing them into any one of our organizations, that we want to make sure that the slate of the panelists, the panel that we're bringing in rather, is diverse. And then we also want to make sure that the interviewers are diverse as well. So we are working internally on having some goals, aspirations around what does an interviewing panel look like at Suffolk? Are there women on the panel? Are there professionals of color interviewing the candidates that are coming in? And then at the same time, in some of our very, even in our higher roles, are there 50% women on the finalist panel? Because there's also research that shows that if women don't make up 50% of the finalists of the top four, let's say, they have a 0% chance of getting the job statistically. So whatever industry you're in, make sure that that final panel of candidates has 50% women and or professionals of color or the intersectionality thereof. Otherwise, women have statistically a 0% chance of getting the job.
Wow, I didn't know that statistic.
Yeah, I believe the research is from Harvard Business School. So it's just these little adjustments that are going to have really profound impact down the line.
But don't you think that that is the support of the CEO or the C-level executives? To me, that is, I mean, you do need it.
Yes.
I've had interviews with people in the construction industry at a higher level, executives, that they don't have the enthusiasm that you are showing right now, or that John Fish is acting on or supporting, right?
Yeah.
I think you couldn't do a lot of it if John was not supporting you. So how important do you see, and how we could convince these executives or CEOs in construction companies just to open their eyes and be more aware of these numbers?
That's an it's a great question. I think that number one, making that data-driven decision that we talked about, there's research from Dodge Data Analytics, and it's super interesting because it looks at construction from, from the GC perspective and also from the design perspective. And we have our own design team here at Suffolk. And it shows the benefits not only to the business, to the developer, and to the community of having a more diverse workforce on any project anywhere in the country, and the business benefits that you will see the fruits of your labor. So it really is the business case for driving more diversity, equity, and inclusion in the construction industry. And I want to say it's a 50-page report, and it's data point after data point that shows the importance. But I also think people are competitive by nature. So seeing the success of what we're doing at Suffolk, amplifying that success, we have stories all over LinkedIn, on our website, even our marketing materials, you'll see very diverse people portrayed because that's not only who we value at Suffolk, but it's also who we want to attract to Suffolk. So I think some of those key things will work regardless of whatever industry you're in. But having that data-driven decision based on the business case also is very compelling.
Yes, I would see showing numbers and showing positive numbers for the business would move hopefully the needle. Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier, removing politics, and that has nothing to do with politics. That just has to do with safety and collaboration and, getting repeat work. All of that is proven in that white paper, which I was grateful to track it down because that helps advance our cause.
Course, and I don't think that what you are trying to say is like, oh, we need to have 100% women in the industry. I think it's just to kind of elevate or balance what is out there. It's nothing against certain kind of people, or you are not segregating anybody. It's how we can bring that balance. And I think some people could misunderstand that sometimes, that you just want
Absolutely.
to
Absolutely.
just giving these opportunities. So now for women, since you've been in the healthcare industry and now in the construction industry, I mean, do you see any advantages to be a woman in construction? Any challenges that women should be aware of?
Hmm. I mean, advantages. Let me think about that. I think some of the advantages of being a woman in construction is that you are a role model and that you are going to be blazing the trail for women behind you. Maybe that's not an advantage. Maybe that's an extra burden. I don't know, but I see it as an advantage or as an opportunity. Um, like I said, there's still room to grow, but quite frankly, I will ask women who are both either the tradespeople or, the leaders in construction, the women in construction on our project sites, how their day-to-day experiences are. And for the women who have been doing this for, let's say, 30 years, they'll say, oh, yeah, 30 years ago, you'd get the cat calls and you'd get this and that. However, now that I'm not going to say it doesn't exist. It is incredibly uncommon. And what's happening now is the men on our construction sites who are aware of some of these problems historically are now being the allies and they're intervening and they're saying, hey, Joe, not cool. You don't get to say that. So that's really something that I would say in the last maybe 20 to 30 years that we have seen a dramatic switch of what's tolerable and what's not tolerable, what's not tolerated on project sites in construction.
Yeah. And that could be a challenge also because there are still for women, especially I would say in the trades, like if there are guys that are not aware of those changes, that's when sometimes some women can experience difficult moments. But I'm glad to hear that the industry is changing and definitely I think every time there is more room for women in the industry. And I'm trying, like, I go and talk to students in colleges and high schools, and I always ask them, especially the girls, like, who wants to come into, or in general, boys and girls, like, who wants to work in the construction industry? I don't see people like raising their hand at all, because there is also a stigma about the industry for men and women, right? So I always tell them, like, you can do, because they're like, oh, I want to get into finance. I'm like, you can do finance in construction, or you can do.
Exactly. Yes.
So so it's like, and especially for women, this stereotype that you need to be a tough bit, like, kind of masculine woman to be in the industry. And I am totally the antithesis of that. I'm like very petite, very like totally the opposite of what people cannot imagine me in the industry. And it's how you can break those stereotypes, right? For the younger generation. So
Yes.
I understand Suffolk is doing something about that too, like talking to students.
Absolutely. So we actually have a what's called a Career Start program, and that's led by Chris Millette, and it's historically been a program where we take college students and put them through like a rotational program. If you think of like a doctor going through residency, it's very, very parallel to that. So we'll hire people from backgrounds like if they have a degree in construction management, engineering, architecture, and we put them through this kind of a trial program of, and the trial isn't we're trying them. They get to try out different facets of construction. So they might do estimating one day. They might go do business development. So really just giving them that exposure. And our career starts have been the most diverse group of people, and that has also been intentional. So we now have goals set around our career starts and what does that look like? And ultimately, internships. Internships are such a great entry point for people to get into construction. So we also, anytime anybody asks us to talk about, women and professionals of color in construction, we will say yes, almost 100% of the time if we have people to go and talk to them. So we'll go to local schools, trade schools like Madison Park, and just go and talk to students about what this could look like. I mean, who knew that a crane operator could make upwards of $200,000 a year? Who knew that a tradesperson average salary is close to six figures? These are things that people don't know about being in the trades. And to your point earlier, that a construction company has that legal team, they have the marketing team, they have a finance team. So I think it's just that misperception of construction that you have to be dirty and sweaty to be in it. And that's just not true.
That is true. I always, to your point about operators, when I was in the job site, I would see the excavator operators, and I'm like, a woman can totally do this. Like, they're sitting down, just moving shifts, right? The whole day. I mean, they are masters. I mean, those things, they move like a hand. I mean,
It's
yes, incredible. They are so good. But women can totally do that. And I'm trying to create that awareness that you don't need to even to be lifting stuff. You can be an operator, and you can make a good living out of it. And I always think a little bit about my Latina women, that a lot of them are in the cleaning industry or in the um, cooking, or like probably industries where they don't get paid as well, and sometimes they need two jobs in order to support their families. I always think, like, if you could train, be an operator, you would be home by 4:30 p.m. You would get good money, and you will have time to spend with your kids. So I think that actually is a very good career for a woman.
absolutely. I agree 100%. And what's interesting about the trades is that you are making a great income and you don't need a college degree. And you also won't have that, the tuition burden that many of us have experienced of going to college. And I do want to touch upon having consideration for removing a college degree as mandatory for any job. So right now, the role that I have for Director of Trade Partner Diversity, I remove the college barrier pre-requirement. So I simply said college degree or equivalent life work experience. And lo and behold, the slate of candidates that were presented to me was incredibly diverse because research shows that once you remove that barrier of college, the entry point is much better for women and professionals of color. So that intentionality is critical as well for any industry.
Yes, I didn't think like the construction world was that advanced at this point.
Well, we are.
Oh God, and all of that. But yeah, Suffolk really impresses me. I think you are really at the cutting edge of everything. So that is very good for you because yes, I mean college in a way is important in my opinion for the structural way, like how your brain thinks. But experience is what really helps you in life. And I admire, especially not having grown up in this country. When I moved here, I really admire how Americans value experience. Because I would give you, I'm not talking about my country, but in Colombia, when you are 35, you are obsolete, basically. They don't want to hire you. And to me, that blows my mind because that's when you really know and you have more experience and you know how things work. So you don't want to keep companies, being run by 20 something kids. Nothing against them. I'm not, but it's a process, right? As you live life, like you cannot buy experience. You just have to live it. And and to your point, like experience, if I didn't have the opportunity to go to college, but I have worked a lot of years in construction, I that is something that should have some value. And I'm glad that you decided to open that to remove that barrier because that would bring probably, as you said, more people that think probably the same or probably could bring more value than a college degree. So that is amazing.
Absolutely.
You really impressed me. And I think the industry needs more people like you too, like, to be open to all of these changes and innovation in a way. Because unfortunately, the construction industry is still behind in so many ways. So having leaders like you that are like pushing and changing processes and ideas. It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for this platform to talk about it.
No, thank you for your time on this. And I'm just gonna ask you one last question because I know we are pretty much done. And what would you advise women or what would you tell women to come and join the industry?
I would love to see in my lifetime more women not only entering the trades, but also working for construction companies. Um, I think that once we shed the light on how things have changed, how this culture of caring that we've cultivated at Suffolk has changed the lived experience for women and professionals of color, um, we do have to still constantly be intentional and keep our foot on the gas because we know that once we take our foot off the pedal, we're going to roll back. We'll see less women in construction. We won't see as many women in administrative buildings at construction companies. So we have to keep our foot on the gas. And we also have to challenge women to get out of their own way and to do things that maybe they feel a little uncomfortable. Was it an adjustment leaving the pharma industry to come to construction? I think the thought of the differences was more intimidating than the reality. So just being brave and getting out of your comfort zone and being open. If you look up that Carla Harris TED Talk, she'll say, when an opportunity presents itself, just be open to it. Don't think of your career trajectory as just this very, very narrow scope. Some opportunities are going to come your way that you didn't even see coming. Be open to the possibilities.
Perfect. And those opportunities are here and you are creating them. I think. Thank you so much for your time. I do really appreciate all your comments, all your wisdom. or your experience. I love the
Thank you.
diversity and inclusion in a very positive way, not in a negative way. So I appreciate your time, Eileen. And I know we will keep the conversation going. And thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Angela.